You a very good call. Remember, we were talking about minolon, minor hanimili, and it seemed like, certainly according from the Rashi here, that it's min haTorah, and you immediately raised without any messing around a Gemara in Sukkah Daf Lamed. I think it was Lamed Daled, wasn't it? Where the Gemara asks there, I think it was Mervin who asked, what about halacha l'Moshe Sinai? There are certain things which have a power of min haTorah, although there's no actual source, but they really are tradition. A typical example is black tefillin, square tefillin. You will not find a source anywhere, but that is called halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So, and we were worried about whether the word minor hanimili applies also to a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Hello, got somebody else coming in. Simon Adler joining us. Good. Yes, Michael, your question was,
yeah,
because it says here minolahu. Where do they learn about the halacha of nisuch hamayim? Remember nisuch hamayim, which is the pouring of the water done during Sukkot, and the Gemara says minolahu, and the Gemara answers hilchas agmir lahu. It's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. I think shut there is the following. You may disagree. The Gemara asks, because it's looking at earlier psukim, it talks about Avi, Nochal, various psukim, and the Gemara then asks, what about, according to this view, where the posuk's not available, where is your source min haTorah from that nisuch hamayim needs to be done, the mitzvah of nisuch hamayim? And I think the Gemara's answer is exactly that. The question is, the Gemara asks, minolahu, where is the source? Says the Gemara, I'm terribly sorry, I haven't got a source min haTorah, but it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Do you see the point? The Gemara expects it to be a source. Says the Gemara, no, it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai, I haven't got a source. So in other words, the Gemara is still asking, expecting there to be a posuk min haTorah. Yeah? Whereas if it will be halacha midrabanon, then, as I say, that there's going to be no posuk, maybe a remez, but no posuk. You with me? So the Gemara here, I think, is asking, where is the source? Where'd you learn this from? Which posuk? Says the Gemara, I'm afraid I haven't got a posuk for this. It's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Stop. That's all. So I think we could still use that principle, but no doubt you'll come with a few more as time goes on. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much.
Back to our Gemara for today, which is Daf Zayin Omid Beis. Right. Yes. I don't know if we made a start on this at all or not, which is where it says Be'echod be'elo Rosh Hashanah la'Maasa Behemoth. Yeah? We're now going back to the Mishnah, if you remember. I think we might have just touched on this last week, and we're going to now develop this a little bit. If you remember the Mishnah, we were talking about the 4 Rosh Hashanahs, although Peter seems to have found another one for today, the 2nd of Tammuz in the email you sent me, but yeah. But anyway, okay, well, yeah, thank you. But we've got 4 Rosh Hashanahs, and we go through them. In fact, the way it works is the 1st of Nisan, although it says Rosh Hashanah Melochim, and if you remember, Liragolim was the Yom Tovim. What does that mean? The Yom Tov which falls in Nisan will also be a Rosh Hashanah. What does that mean? If you remember, it's for Regolim, for Baal Ta'acher. Do you remember Baal Ta'acher? Baal Ta'acher means delaying, bringing korbanos. Do you remember the clock starts? It's got to be Pesach. So whenever you made your neder, for example, you promised to bring a korban, the clock starts at Pesach. Remember we saw 5-way machlokas, 5 ways cornea, 5 machlokas, 5 ways, whether it's just 1 Yom Tov, is it just 3 Yom Tovim? And what it means is this: once a person has gone beyond those 3 Yom Tovim, there will be an avera of what's called Baal Ta'acher. A person should do things immediately, but there is an avera of Baal Ta'acher. And if you remember, there were lots of machlokas. Is it 1 Yom Tov? And already then you've done the avera Baal Ta'acher. Is it 2? Is it 3? Does it have to be 3 in sequence? And we ended up saying our Mishnah, which says it's the 1st of Nisan, which means it's the Yom Tov which falls in Nisan that will be the beginning of the 3 Yom Tovim for Baal Ta'acher. You with me? So in fact, the Rosh Hashanah for Baal Ta'acher is actually the 15th of Nisan. Yeah? So the first of Nisan was the Rosh Hashanah for kings. A king goes beyond the Rosh Hashanah, the first of Nisan. It's now in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th year of his reign. When it talks about Regolim, it's the Yom Tov which falls in Nisan, which means therefore the 15th of Nisan is the starting point for the Aveira of Baal Ta'acher. Okay? Then we mentioned something else, and we said here, we spoke a few weeks on the 1st of Tishri, for Shemitah, Yovel. Well, that's actually coming up. We haven't spoken about it here, but we mentioned that in the Mishnah. But what we're looking at is the second one mentioned in the Mishnah, which could actually be the third one. What I mean by the third, in other words, you've got the 1st of Nisan, the 15th of Nisan starting the Yom Tovim for Baal Ta'acher delaying, and then we've got the 1st of Elul is Rosh Hashanah for Maasa, and Maasa means Maasa Behemoth. And on that, there's a machlokas because Rab Loza and Rab Shimon say this is also the 1st of Tishri. Now, do you remember about Maasa Behemoth? Quick look at the Mishnah again. Remind ourselves of the very first Mishnah, Daf Beis Amud Aleph. Remind ourselves about Maasa Behemoth. Have you got it? The third narrow line in Rashi is Maasa Behemoth. Maasa Behemoth is a wonderful mitzvah. Why do I say wonderful? It appears right at the end of Parshas Bechukosai. There are 2 psukim right at the end. Actually, it's maftir. And the pasuk says, I'll read the pasuk for you at the end of Bechukosai. V'chol Maaseh bokov atzoin, cattle, flock, the Maaseh, the 10th, it has to pass underneath like a staff or a stick. And remember, it's in the pen, and they come out of the pen one at a time. And then there's a mark made on the 10th animal. It applies to cattle, flock. Ho asiri yihye kodesh Hashem. The 10th is kodesh Hashem, says the pasuk. And then the next pasuk says, one extra halacha about it, and there are 2 psukim for that mitzvah, and that's it. Don't select. You cannot select either positively or negatively. You may say the 10th is meant to be, and it's going to be a korban. This 10th one will be a korban, so maybe I should take the best as a korban. Or maybe the person feels that way inclined. He may feel, actually, I think I'll keep the best for myself and select something which isn't so good. There's no selection. You put them in, they're in a pen, they come out one at a time, and you do not push through the one that you'd like. It's totally, as you'd say, random. They've come out. That's the second halacha. A very interesting Rashi. Rashi on this says, yes, they go through in the pen in the entrance, one after the other. And then Rashi says, it should be holy. Holy in which way? The 10th animal, every year that are born. Yeah, it's 1 year. And according to the Tana Kama, that will be the 1st of Elul. So you'd watch all animals born, let's say, for example, all lambs that are born from the 1st of Elul up to the end of the next year. That would be Av. And all those animals are kept together. They've just been born that year. And then you take the 10th, which means you let them come through the pen, through the opening, the door of the pen. And Rashi says the following. What happens to this? This is offered up. And of course, some people, hopefully most, when we talk about Ezer Mekoimon, we've got Habachor, Ba'amazeh, Ba'apesach, Kodeshim Kalim Pesach, Habachor, which is the firstborn, and Maasa means the 10th of the flock, the sheep that are born each year. That will also be a korban. That's very interesting. What happens to that 10th? Is it given to the Kohen? Says Rashi, an interesting Rashi. Rashi says no, it's eaten by the owners. A bit like Maisa Sheni, you'd come up to Yerushalayim and you then eat it, be kedusha, as you would do a korban Pesach in Yerushalayim. Very interesting. Says Rashi the following. The food, or the flesh of the animal, is eaten by the owners. Why? Says Rashi, an amazing Rashi, Shaharei lo nimna im matnas kuhuna. You don't find it mentioned in the matnas kuhuna. We'd be talking about that in Parshas Korach. When you've got the matnas kuhuna, you do not find Maasa Behemoth is mentioned. We talk about the 24 special gifts that are given to the Kohen, whether it's Truma, whether it's Pidyon Aben, but you do not find that Maasa Behemoth is mentioned. Therefore, says Rashi, by default, as it's not mentioned there, it therefore is owned by the owners themselves. And what they have to do, he says, Shalom otzinu sheinosen b'sorah l'kohanim. We don't find anywhere. Interesting. You don't find a posuk. There's no Gemara. There's nothing anywhere to suggest that this would be another gift to the Kohanim, and therefore is a gift to the person himself. He would have to bring it to Yerushalayim and eat it there. Either anybody can give it to other people. They'd have to eat it though in Yerushalayim. So it can be given to anybody else. Now there's a most beautiful Sefer HaChinuch. I don't know if people are familiar with the Sefer HaChinuch. Here we are. Sefer HaChinuch. Most people say it may be written by it's called Rab Aaron Alevi, one of the Rishonim, and he says the following in Mitzvah Shin Samach. If you look in Mitzvah Shin Samach, this is the Mitzvah. What he does in Sefer HaChinuch, he goes through all the 613 Mitzvahs, explaining them, the halachas about them. Beautiful, the Sefer HaChinuch, on which there's a famous pirush called the Minchas Chinuch, which is much later, but this is the Sefer HaChinuch written by the Rishon, and very interesting. The mitzvah of what he does is he gives a possible reason, not the only reason. Even, obviously, many reasons are beyond us, but he does actually give reasons. One reason for all the mitzvahs. This mitzvah of Maasa Behemoth. What is this mitzvah? This mitzvah is the 10th. You've got other things. What's this Maasa Behemoth? And he says the following, but beautiful. He says, Hashem selected Am Yisrael. They've got responsibilities. And they should be busy in Limud Torah. They should be busy in spiritual matters. But Hashem knew not everybody is up to spending all their time in rabbinics. There's other things in the world too. And therefore, beautiful pshat, what he says is the following. Hashem wanted, Nosan Lohem, there should be a place, Yerushalayim, Sheye, everybody should realize, Ki Mitzion Teitze Seirah. That is the place where they're studying, where you've got the Kohanim, you've got the Sanhedrin Agadol. So therefore he said, if there's going to be a place like this, it would be wonderful if everybody could link up to such a place. What does that mean? Therefore, there was a mitzvah called Maasa Behemoth, which you've got to eat in Yerushalayim. So what are you going to do? Either you yourself are going to go to Yerushalayim, or you'll arrange that members of your family should be living in Yerushalayim so that you could be sending them out these gifts. And he says, therefore, the person either themselves will go or they'll have a member of their family in Yerushalayim being supported by themselves. There's Maasa Sheni, which also goes, as we said, remember, Netter Avoid, the 4th year produce also goes to the people living in Yerushalayim. Each of yourself, probably best, as we say, charity starts at home. So if you are giving this Maasa Behemoth, why give it to someone else? It's true. There are lots of gifts that do go to the Kohanim and the Leviim. This present does not have to be given to the Kohanim and Leviim. Well, I might as well have somebody of my family living there. And therefore will enjoy this, or the Maasa Sheni. And therefore, beautiful Lashon. And this is where it comes from, where we always talk about, remember the Yiddish mama who always says, my son, yeah, we know about the barrister, the lawyer, the teacher, but also my son, the rabbi. Every family, Hashem wanted every family to have their member of their family, the rabbi, living in Eretz Yisrael, living in Yerushalayim, so that the family themselves would link up. They'd always have that one person who will be their spiritual leader in the family. Could be a cousin, could be an uncle, somebody in the family who they would link up to, and therefore, again, if they had questions to ask, again, this individual would be giving them and raising their stature as well, spiritually. Wonderful. Umitoich kach, says the Chinuch, Yeh kol bayis v'bayis miYisrael ish chocham. There'll always be one sage, there'll be one rabbi in the family. Asher yelamed chochmasoi. He'll teach everybody. So if you've got questions, he'll be teaching them, he'll be advising them, he'll be ensuring they're attending Shiurim. Beautiful. And therefore, there is this mitzvah of Maasa Behemoth, which has to be eaten in Yerushalayim, not given to a Kohen, and therefore may well be you'd have family members there to whom you could give this gift. A beautiful pshat of Maasa Behemoth. Back to the Rashi.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
About, you said Sefer Chinuch is all the 613 mitzvahs.
Yes.
Are there different views on exactly what some of those mitzvahs are, or is it all universally agreed?
No, it is. You're right. There is a machlokes. Whether I think it goes like this: there are lots of mitzvahs. The question is that in the heading number whatever, or is it a subset of? It's still a mitzvah min Torah. What are the actual headings of the 613? And you're quite right. There is a machlokes about them. What are the headings? Right. Not so much a machlokes whether the mitzvah is min ha-Torah or not. It might come under, you sometimes have, let's say, subsets of all mitzvahs. Like, for example, Shabbos. I mean, you know, the huge number of halachas, all min ha-Torah. Clearly, that's a mitzvah min ha-Torah. But the question is, how would you number the 613? You're right. That is a Sefer Chinuch's view, generally taking adopting the same view as the Rambam. But if you look in the beginning of the Rambam, just in the Sefer of the Yad, you've got the Ramban who argues with him, not so much as when a mitzvah is min ha-Torah, but is it a category in itself, or is it a subset? So what the actual number of the 613, there's a Machlokes Ramban, and I say in the Sefer, called the Yad Chazok of the Rambam before that, there's the Ramban, Ben Nachman, Moshe Ben Nachmanides, who would argue and say, no, actually, that's not a heading. It's really that, take that out, or the Rambam's forgotten to make this a heading and therefore delete something else. But you're right, the Sefer HaChinuch sticking mainly to the view of the Rambam, but beautiful there because he's got Shorshei HaMitzvah, the roots of the mitzvahs. So I say you can get hold of that Sefer, wonderful Sefer. And I say besides talking about the dinim, he does talk about the shoroshim, the roots, and he gives a reason. Obviously, huge number of reasons for all the mitzvahs. Many we don't understand, esoteric reasons, but he gives very down-to-earth reasons for each one of the mitzvahs. So a nice gift. It was always a popular one for the mitzvahs, Sefer HaChinuch. And now, we are talking about mitzvah 360, Shin Samach, and that is the mitzvah of Maasa Behemoth. Have a look at this Rashi, gentlemen, on the Mishnah, Maasa Behemoth.
Where is the Rashi?
First page, Daf Beis Amud Aleph.
Yeah.
And it's 3 narrow lines down.
Thanks. Yeah, got it.
Yep. Good, excellent. And here, Maasa Behemoth, She'ein Masim. Now, this is the point. Here we're talking, there's a machlokes in the Mishnah. When is the Rosh Hashanah for Maasa Behemoth? What does that mean? It means all animals, let's say sheep, that are born between date A and a year later, date A, are all kept together. During the year, that's fine, but as long as they're marked in some way to know this is actually from this particular year, then they will go through this pen, and the 10th one will be marked as Maasa Behemoth. And it goes according to the the Mishnah. We've said the first of Elul is this Rosh Hashanah, although that's the Stam Mishnah. That's going to be very crucial because there's no name to that view, but there is a name to the Rabbi Loz and Rabbi Shimon who say that actually the Rosh Hashanah is not the first of Elul, it's the first of Tishri. Why they differ, the Gemara will pick up, not for today, from various psukim as to whether it should be Elul or Tishri. But at the moment, let's just focus on Maasa Behemoth. Have a look at the Rashi. La Maasa Behemoth, She'ein Maasrin Min. Have you got that? In the Rashi on the Mishnah, Daf Beis Amud Aleph. Do not take your Maasa min hanoilodim b'shana zu, from those that are born in this year, an hanoilodim b'chaverta, compared to other animals which are born in a subsequent year. Every year, a bit like, Havdil, Elef Havdolas, I should say, some tax, when you've got capital gains, it may well depend on the actual year. You can't necessarily link up, but let's not go through any accounting procedures here. But the idea is you've got a tax year. Similarly, you've got a year, again here, the tax year for Maasa Behemoth, according to the Tanakhama, the Stam view in the Mishnah is the first of Elul. Back to this Rashi. And how do you know that? Maybe you've just got to take a 10th of all your animals over a 5-year period, because it says aser to aser. People may be familiar with this pasuk. Aser to aser, Parshas Re'eh, as called to azarecha. You should surely, double losh, note that surely take a 10th, aser to aser, as called to azarecha, all the produce of your zarecha, your seeds, Hayodse hasode, which actually does grow, but look at this, shona, year by year. Now you could say, well, that's talking about things that are growing. It says Hayodse basode, yeah. It says Tavua zarecha. Says the Gemara, yes, you're right, but it starts at the beginning. It says aser to aser, double loshen. Says the Gemara, the reason of that double loshen. And this is Gemara in Bechoros, which you'd expect for talking about Bechor, where there's Bechor Behemoth or Bechor Odom. It says in Bechoros, Beperek Maasa Behemoth, suitable perek in Maasa Behemoth. Bishtei Maasrus Hakosu Badaba. Oh yes, that pasuk is actually talking about the 10th of things that grow. Yes, that's also called Maaser, but there's another Maaser, not just things that grow, maybe they grow in a different way, but these are animals themselves. Echad Maaser Behemoth, Echad Maaser Dogon. Dogon is crops, corn. Maaser Behemoth as well. There's another rule, and notice it says Shona. Year by year, there's a tax year for Maaser Behemoth. Just like there's a tax year for produce of the ground, there's a produce also Maaser Behemoth of the 10th of the animals that are born that year. So our Mishnah said when you're working out that tax year, it actually goes from Elul to Elul, according to the Tanakhama. Yeah, the first view, the Stam name, or actually I shouldn't say, he hasn't got a name. He's nameless, anonymous. That's what we were talking about a Stam Mishnah. The anonymous view in the Mishnah is the view that we talk about the first of Elul, and then the Mishnah says, Rabbi Loz of Rabbi Shimon Oimrim be'echod b'Tishri. Now let's turn back to our Gemara, gentlemen, on Daf Zayin Omid Beis. So, have you got it? About 15 lines down, it says, Mishkach Shchichi Kitri, that was last week with all the clouds. I haven't got many clouds at the moment, but clouds. Be'echod be'elo Rosh Hashanah lamaaseh Behemoth. Almost halfway down the page. Have you got it? Daf Zayin on the base, Maasa Behemoth. Says the Gemara, we often do this. We have a Mishnah which is anonymous. Now, anonymous actually gives it quite a lot of power because it means, as it's anonymous, it's particularly anonymous to show often that is actually the halacha. We talk about a Stam Mishnah. Not always, many instances, a Stam Mishnah. Okay? So says the Gemara, who actually is the author of that view? Who is the person who holds the view, and therefore who actually is the Mishnah? That will be our Mishnah. Who is that stum, the anonymous person? Come forward, please. Put your hand up. We're asking who is the anonymous person mentioned in the Mishnah who says the Rosh Hashanah for Maasa Behemoth is the first of Elul. Money, says Gemara, money, not talking about any financial issue here, but where you've got the word money, it means who is the author? Minor, who I suppose, Rabbi Meir. Says the Gemara, this actually is the view of Rabbi Meir. Because we've actually got, although it says the Sanya, it should be the Snan, it's a Mishnah, and the Mishnah is in Bechoros. Rab Meir Oimer. Have you got it? Next line of the Gemara. Rab Meir Oimer be'echod be'elul Rosh Hashanah Maasa. There, he's actually named. So that's very helpful. Yeah. Says the Gemara, Rab Meir Oimer be'echod be'elul Rosh Hashanah Maasa Behemoth. Full stop. So that's very nice. We now know that this, our Mishnah, the anonymous name or names in our Mishnah are it's going to be Rab Meir. That's very nice. Says the Gemara, just one moment, please. Now, people may remember, if people remember the names, we mentioned already that when it came to Regolim, which talks about Bal Ta'acher, which talks about delaying, for example, Korbanos. Remember, our Mishnah said that it's the Yom Tov that falls in Nisan, which is the start of the 3 Yomim Tovim, after which you would have sadly fallen foul of the Aveira of Bal Ta'acher. Okay? And
Can I just ask something? Sorry.
Yes.
So you may have mentioned it because my mind just wandered, but do we say stum Mishnah of Meir here? Do we say that? I mean, is there a cloud that the?
Very good. You're right. Without knowing anything more, you'd expect it to be Rab Meir, but it isn't always. And in our example, this is going to be quite important. We're not just taking the general rule of stum Mishnah Rab Meir. We've actually got a proof that it is Rab Meir, because we've got his states actually in Bechoros this point. So yes, you're right, Mervyn. You say a default position might be Rab Meir. In fact, we don't have to even use that default standard position. We're certain that this is the view of Rab Meir. There can be other instances, as I say, and we're actually going to follow that through here right now, that a stum Mishnah will not be Rab Meir. Okay, so you're quite right. Generally, without thinking about it, you'd expect it to be Rab Meir. More than that, in our case, we know it's Rab Meir because his name is mentioned in Bechoros when we're talking about the Rosh Hashanah for Maasa Behemoth is the first of Elul. Says the Gemara, I've got a problem with that. What's the problem? The problem is, go back to Bal Ta'acher. We can never escape, Peter, Bal Ta'acher, you see. Always back to Bal Ta'acher, delaying. Rosh Hashanah for delaying. So, if you remember, we had 5 views. Let's not go through all of them, but there was 2 that we need to remember. One is our Mishnah, and one is what was the view of Rabbi Meir. Now, does anybody remember what the view of Rabbi Meir was about Bal Ta'acher? Now, we do have to turn back some pages. Have a look at Daf Daled Omid Base, gentlemen. Only for those that need reminding. It was a brisa which started on the previous page, went through all the things which are included in Bal Ta'acher, and the top said, once you've passed 3 regolim, over Bal Ta'acher. That was the very first view of that brisa, but once you have any 3 in any order, you've got 3, you're over Bal Ta'acher. Then you had Rab Shimon Omer, Shloisha Regolim Kasidron. Do you have that? Daf Daled on the base. It's got to be Kasidron. It's got to be Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot. So, for example, if someone in Iyar made a neder to bring a korban, he would have Shavuos, Sukkot, And then again, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot to ensure he brings a korban. That is the view of Rab Shimon. Continue on. Rab Shimon Amishloisha Regolim Kasidron Chagamatzis Techila, starting with Pesach. Rab Meir Oimer Kiben She'ov Aleim Regel Echod Oiver Babal Ta'acher. Rab Meir is of the opinion just one at Yom Tov. Then we brought some other views. We said 2 Regolim. Rabbi Elazar Rab Shimon says it's always Sukkot. Okay, leaving those views, let's just focus on 2, Rab Shimon and Rab Meir. Rab Shimon, of course, Rab Shimon ben Yochai. So what does Rab Shimon ben Yochai hold? It's not 3 in any 3. It's got to be 3 in sequence. If it's 3 in sequence, then of course it's quite appropriate and relevant to say that when is it going to start, the 3 in sequence? It starts with Pesach, and hence our Mishnah says the Rosh Hashanah for Bal Ta'acher will be Pesach. According to Rab Meir, Bal Ta'acher is just the very first Yom Tov you've got to bring the korban, then you're in trouble. There's no Rosh Hashanah for Bal Ta'acher. It's not relevant because it's always the very first Yom Tov. You with me? Our Mishnah says that the Yom Tov falling in Nisan is the Rosh Hashanah for Bal Ta'acher, L'Regolim for Bal Ta'acher, which means it's got to start in Pesach. That is the view solely of Rab Shimon ben Yochai. Rabbi Meir is of the opinion there is no Rosh Hashanah for Bal Ta'acher, because once you've missed the first Yom Tov, you're in trouble. With me? So, we just spoke about the mitzvah of Maasa Behemoth. And we said Stam Mishnah. You'd expect the Stam Mishnah anyway, but we proved the point that the Stam Mishnah that says the first of Elul is when you start the tax year for Maasa Behemoth, that is the view of Rab Meir. He says so. Just 1 minute, says the Gemara. Go back to our Gemara now. Beginning of the line is Lamaser. Have you got it, Lamaser, in the Gemara? Yeah? Almost halfway down the page, up Zion on the base. Lamaser Behemoth. So 1 minute, let's just focus. The Stam Mishnah, which is anonymous, is Rab Meir, who says it's the first of Elul. We mentioned, when it came to Bal Ta'acher, we said we want 3 in order, starting Pesach. Who was that? That was the view of Rab Shimon. Says the Gemara, V'lirgolin mani Rab Shimon. This is all over the place. You normally have a Mishnah, which is, I say, you've got in it, you may have some anonymous views, and you'd say, that's Rab Meir, as you say, normal Stam. Maybe for some particular reason it might be someone else, but make your mind up. We've got the first part of the Mishnah, the Stam Mishnah, being Rab Shimon. We've then got Rab Meir, who is the Stam Mishnah when it comes to Maasa Behemoth, the first of Elul. And more than that, keep going. Aim a Sefer. In a moment, we're going to mention Rab Elazar, Rab Shimon, Oimim, Echo B'Tishri. So, what it says the Gemara, Reisha Sefer Rab Shimon. You're telling me the Stam Mishnah earlier on, the anonymous view at the beginning is Rab Shimon. Later on, Rab Shimon is going to be mentioned. And in the middle, we've got Rab Meir being an anonymous individual. And that's what's going on here. Make your mind up, who is this anonymous man? Is he Rab Meir? Is he Rab Shimon? Have a look at Rashi. V'lirgolim mani Rab Shimon. Have you got it? You can line Rab Shimon in the Rashis. How do you know that? How do you know that where it talks about 3 Yom Tovim starting with Pesach for Bal Ta'acher, how do you know that is the view of Rab Shimon? Says Rashi, Doho alibei ukimne, according to him, we've established the Islay Kasidron. He and he alone is the Tana that holds it's got to be in sequence starting with Pesach. And we spent a few weeks on that. L'Bal Ta'acher. Says the Gemara, Rashi, Sefer Rab Elazar, Rab Shimon Omrim, again, Sefer Rab Elazar, Rab Shimon Omrim Be'echo B'Tishri. The Sefer is going to be Rab Shimon. The first part, the anonymous individual in the first part is Rab Shimon. And in the middle, when we talk about the tax here for Maasa Behemoth, that's Rab Meir. What is going on here? Make your mind up. Who is this Stam, the anonymous individual in the Mishnah? Says the Gemara, very interesting Gemara, says the Gemara, Omar Rav Yosef. Beginning of the line is Rav Yosef. In answer to this, Rav Yosef comes forward and he says, I'll tell you who the Stam Mishnah is. The Stam Mishnah is the view of Rebbe. What? Yeah, because it is Rebbe. How does it work out to be Rebbe now? I thought we said Rab Meir, Rab Shimon. It is Rebbe. All those, wherever there's an anonymous view mentioned in the Mishnah, that is all Rebbe. You know what, says the Gemara? V'nosiv lo aliba de tanoi. He is actually of the opinion, which you can do. On this subject, he supports Rab Meir. On this subject, he supports Rab Shimon. But in fact, the Stam Mishnah of our whole Mishnah is Rebbe himself. That Rebbe, of course, redacting all the Mishnayos, this time it's he is the one who's putting his own name there, being anonymous. It's a Stam, not like the normal, the default position. And therefore, the Stam Mishnah throughout says the Gemara, V'nosib lo aliba de tanoi. Regolim, when we're talking about Regolim of Balta Acher, Sover Loka Rab Shimon. He holds like the view of Rab Shimon. It's 3 Yom Tovim in order, in sequence. Upa Maasa Behemoth, Sover Loka Rab Meir. Very good. Have a look at Rashi. Rebbe he. This is the view of Rebbe. Who Amora Lemasnisen. He is the one who actually states this Mishnah. You sometimes put yourself into bat. Here in this Mishnah, he is Rabbi Yehuda Anossi himself is the source, is the Stam Mishnah. The Nosiv Milsei, he takes the matter Choda Kachatana, Choda Kachatana. You can do that. On this view, on this subject, he paskins like Rab Meir. On this subject, he paskins like Rab Shimon. Very good. Says the Gemara, not so good. Why not? Now we've got a bit of a problem. What's the problem? Ihochi, have you got the Ihochi? Let's work out the numbering system here. Arba, they are not 4 Rosh Hashanahs at all. There are therefore 5. What do you mean there are 5 Rosh Hashanahs? Have a look at Rashi. Ihochi, says Rashi. Dechad Gavra Amora, one individual is the Stam Mishnah. It's Rab Meir. No, it's not. When I say Rab Meir, it's the view of Rab Meir, the view of, you with me? It's Rabbi Yehuda Hanossi, who is the author of our Mishnah, right? But at the beginning of the Mishnah, he said, Arba Rosh Hashanah. That's his view. Now, how's that going to work? Have a look at Rashi. Sometimes he's holding like this Tana and sometimes like that. Let's ask Rabbi Yehuda Anossi, how many Rosh Hashanahs are there? Says Rashi, Chamisha Rosh Hashanim Ninu. How'd you get 5? The 1st of Nisan, that's for kings. The 15th of Nisan, that's going to be the Balta Acher. Remember, for delaying it, it starts, the New Year starts with the Yom Tov of Pesach. That's the 15th. 2. If he holds like Rab Meir and not like Rab Shimon about Maasa Behemoth, he's going to have the 1st of Elul. That's number 3. Then he will have the 1st of Tishri for Yovel, Shemitah. No argument about that. And then he's going to have Tu B'Shvat, assuming he passes like Beis Hillel. Even if he passes like Beis Shammai, you'd have the 1st of Shvat. But assuming he passes like Beis Hillel, it would still give him a 5th, which is the Yom Tov for trees. Chag, yeah, Tu B'Shvat Higia, Chag HaIlanot, and that gives you 5. Okay? Now, says Rashi, so how come until now we didn't have a problem? Says Rashi, I'll tell you why we didn't have a problem. Until this point, until we got to Maasa Behemoth, we were very happy thinking that the Mishnah said at the beginning, the Rosh Hashanah for Baal Ta'acher is the 15th of Nisan, is Rab Shimon. Why would that be so good? Because, says Rashi, if that would be Rab Shimon, Shapir. Shapir means that's all very good. Why? According to Rab Shimon, our board, there would be 4. How come there 4? What does Rab Shimon hold about Maasa Behemoth in our Mishnah? It was only Rab Meir who held it was the first of Elul. You can turn to the Mishnah, please, gentlemen. Turn to Daf Beis Amud Aleph. Second line down. Lamaaseh Rosh Hashanah, again, Be'echod Be'elul, second line. Be'echod Be'elul Rosh Hashanah Lamaaseh Behemoth. And we've said that's Rab Meir, or Kun Rab Yehuda HaNossi, that's he's supporting that view. Look at the next line. Rab Loza Rab Shimon Omrim Be'echod B'Tishri. Rab Shimon is of the view that the taxia for Maasa Behemoth is the 1st of Tishri. He doesn't have the 1st of Elul. Therefore, in his counting system, what are his 4? The 1st of Nisan, the 15th of Nisan, the 1st of Tishri, and Tu B'Shvat, 1st of Shvat, Tu B'Shvat. That gives you 4. So until this point, we never had a problem. But now you're telling me that the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda HaNossi, who supports a view of Rab Meir. You've ended up with the 1st of Nisan, the 15th of Nisan, the 1st of Elul, the 1st of Tishri, and Tu B'Shvat. That gives you 5. Have a look at the end of this Rashi. If we would have thought it's Rab Shimon, the beginning of line of Rashi, Shapir, that's very good. There are only 4. The Lesle Echod Be'elul. You take out of the calculation the 1st of Elul, because Rab Shimon holds that the taxia for Maasa Behemoth is the 1st of Tishri. We were already counting the 1st of Tishri for several other things. So you haven't got an extra number. Elo Ichad Tano Omrinu, but if you're telling me this is Rabbi Yehuda HaNossi, who is now supporting the view of Rab Shimon over here, Rab Meir over here, then you've ended up with 5. And how come Rabbi Yehuda HaNossi in the Mishnah said there are 4 Rosh Hashanahs? There are 5 dates in the year which are Rosh Hashanah according to Rabbi Yehuda HaNossi. With me? Says the Gemara.
Can I just ask? I mean, if the whole Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda HaNossi, why does he mention it? Blossom Rab Shimon. Why does he mention?
That's a very good question. That Gemara, that question is asked in various places, and often he writes down the name of other people that you should never think that he's forgotten about those views. You often have those views to say, even though there are those very important views, I'm still putting a stam Mishnah that way because for whatever reason, maybe there were several other Tanoim, maybe they decided for whatever reason that is what I'd like to have stated as the stam Mishnah. So sometimes he does mention the other view, just so you know, I haven't forgotten about those other views. There are those other views. Nevertheless, I'm telling you that I'd like to support the view I've placed as the anonymous view. Okay? So back now to our Gemara. So we've got a question now. If our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda HaNossi, there are not 4 Rosh Hashanahs, there are 5. Very good for the people selling cards for the Rosh Hashanah purposes, but not for anybody else. But says the Gemara, Omar Rav Yosef, we saw that. Omar Rovo, beginning of the line is Rovo. This is what he's saying. The initial statement of Rabbi Yehuda HaNossi is, forget what I hold. I'm telling you that according to those Tanoim, Rabbi Meir, who he says, Arbol Divrei HaKol, According to everybody, there are 4. I actually support this view and that view because I'm a bit of a hybrid. I'm taking 2 different views. But if you look at the 2 big Tanoim that we're talking about here, Rab Meir and Rab Shimon, both of them hold there are 4 Rosh Hashanahs. That's the view of Rabbah. So that's what he's saying. Rabbi Yehuda Anossi is starting saying, I'm going to select a couple of views, that's true. But if you take these 2 Tanoim, each one of them holds there are just 4 Rosh Hashanahs. And we're going to have to work this out. How do you get only 4 according to Rab Meir? And how are you going to have 4 according to Rab Shimon? Says the Gemara. Omar Rabba, beginning of line, Abor Lidivrako. Le Rab Meir, according to the view of Rab Meir, Arbor, therefore, why? Because you're going to take out the 15th of Nisan. Why are you going to remove the 15th of Nisan? The 15th of Nisan is only a Rosh Hashanah according to Rab Shimon if you have to have 3 in sequence. Rab Meir, as we saw, is of the opinion you need just 1 Yom Tov. Well, whichever is the first Yom Tov. It's not relevant to talk about a Rosh Hashanah for Balta Acher. It's not appropriate at all. With me? So therefore, remove the 15th. And what have you got according to Rab Meir? The 1st of Nisan, the 1st of Elul, because that's Rosh Hashanah for Maasa Behemoth, the 1st of Tishri, and Tu B'Shvat 4. According to Rab Shimon, how will he have just 4? Rab Shimon, there will also be 4. Why? Which one will you remove according to Rab Shimon? The Maasa Behemoth. It was only Rab Meir who held that the Rosh Hashanah, the taxia for Maasa Behemoth was the 1st of Elul. Rab Shimon and Rab Loza, mentioned in the Mishnah, are of the opinion it's the 1st of Tishri. We're already counting the 1st of Tishri, so we have not got an extra date. So according to Rab Shimon, remove Maasa Behemoth, and what do you have? The 1st of Nisan, the 15th of Nisan, the 1st of Tishri, and Tu B'Shvat, because you do not have the 1st of Elul. So that's what Rabbi Yehuda Anossi is saying. My earlier Tanoim, Rab Meir and Rab Shimon, they are of the opinion there are just 4 Rosh Hashanahs. One, they may differ which they are, but there are 4 Rosh Hashanahs. In halacha, I actually paskin sometimes Rab Meir, sometimes Rab Shimon. But looking at those earlier Tanoim, both of them, each of them holds there are 4 Rosh Hashanahs. And that's meant to be an easy way to remember things. He's telling you that, and it'd be up to you to plan and work out which they are. Have a look at the Rashi. Omar Rabba. La'olam Rebbe. It really is Rebbe. V'hochi kol. This is what he means. Ano, I, Chamisha, spherically. I actually hold there are 5 Rosh Hashanahs. Umiu, Hakol Modimli, Ba'arbo. Everybody agrees with that there are, of those 5 that I hold, they all agree that 4 of them are a Rosh Hashanah. Each one differently, mind, but they all hold 4. And this is meant to help you work out which the 4 are, says the Gemara, Rashi. No, Rab Meir di Islay Echod Be'elul. Remember, Rab Meir holds the taxia for Maasa. Behemoth is the 1st of Elul. Dal, Regolim. What's Dal? Dal means remove. Lift up. Amim Hashem ki dili soni. Lift up Regolim and take out. What do you mean take out Regolim? Regolim was Balta Acher. That's when you have 3 in sequence beginning with Pesach, the 15th. Remove that one. Because according to Rab Meir, you are already over the Avera of Balta Acher just with 1 Yom Tov, whichever Yom Tov it happens to be, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. There is no Rosh Hashanah. We learned then Daf Daladom and Base, which we pointed out. But next Rashi, but according to Rab Shimon, Dal Maasa Behemoth. Remove Maasa Behemoth, Delesa Ela Be'echod B'Tishri. If you move out Maasa Behemoth, according to Rab Shimon, that is on the 1st of Tishri. Ubelav Maaser, and if you don't have Maasa Behemoth, or I think it means without having Maasa, Nami Rosh Hashanah. The point is this: if Maasa Behemoth was the only item of a Rosh Hashanah for Tishri, then you had another number, but it's not true. We are, says Rashi, we are already counting Tishri as a Rosh Hashanah. We are now just lumping together with it, not just Shemitah, not just other items, we are lumping with it Maasa Behemoth. So Rab Shimon says, I've got 4 Rosh Hashanahs, according to Rab Shimon. The 1st of Tishri, no, the 1st of Nisan, the 15th of Nisan, the 1st of Tishri, and 2 Bishvat. Very good. That's the view of Rava. Says Rava's Talmud, I've got a different shot. Very nice. Very nice to hear from the Talmud. Rab Nachman by Yitzchok. There are 2 Rab Nachmans. There's Rab Nachman by Yitzchok, Rab Nachman by Yaakov. Rab Nachman by Yaakov actually was a Rebbe of Rava. So let's not worry about him. We're talking here about Rab Nachman by Yitzchok, who is the Talmud of Rava, which is fine. You can disagree as long as you do it with respect to his Rebbe. Rab Nachman by Yitzchok says no. You know what the Mishnah meant? And this now fits in even with Rabbi Yehuda Hanossi. The Mishnah meant Arba Chadoshim. There are 4 months in the year which have Rosh Hashanah in them. It's true. Sometimes there can be more than one date in that Chodesh which will have a Rosh Hashanah, but there are only 4 months that have a Rosh Hashanah. Ubohem kama Rosh Hashanah. There will be perhaps more than one. How does that work now? Now, do you remember the question we had on Rabbi Yehuda Hanossi? Rabbi Yehuda Hanossi holds there are there are 5 Rosh Hashanahs. Why? The 1st of Nisan, the 15th of Nisan, the 1st of Elul, the 1st of Tishri, and 2 Bishvat. What he's saying, there are 4 months which have Rosh Hashanahs. The 2 that appear in Nisan, the 1st and the 15th, is 1, because it means in the month of Nisan, there is a Rosh Hashanah. In fact, there are 2 Rosh Hashanahs. Have a look at Rashi. Ubohen kamo Rosh Hashanim, and in fact, there are a few Rosh Hashanahs. Hilkoch, therefore, says Rashi, Nisan de Islay Trey. Nisan actually has 2. It's got the 1st and the 15th. Don't worry about it.
Sorry, question.
Hold on. Chad Kochoshible, you would only count it as 1. And that's what Rabbi Yehuda Hanossi was saying right at the beginning of the Mishnah. Arba Rosh Hashanah, it means there are 4 months which have within them a Rosh Hashanah. But it doesn't mean to say they're more than 4. In fact, there are 5 Rosh Hashanahs, but 4 months which have it in. David.
Well, Arba Rosh Hashanah, though, it does sound quite straightforwardly as meaning there are 4 Rosh Hashanahs. It doesn't say that there are 4 months in which there are Rosh Hashanahs. True.
That no doubt, Robert would answer back and say exactly what you're saying. The problem with what that view is that according to Rabbi Yehuda Hanossi, there really are 5. So you end up having to say what he meant was there's 4 according to Rabbi Meir and 4 according to Rabbi Shimon, which again has a little bit of a weakness because it doesn't say that. It sounds like he's saying there are only 4.
Yeah.
So either way round, there's a little bit of a weakness, and you're quite right, you spotted it doesn't mention Chadoshim. And the normal way, if I were to tell you there are 4 Rosh Hashanahs, you wouldn't think I'm talking about months. Yes, but the other way also has its weakness. It's not Rabbi Yehuda Hanossi. You'd have to say he was talking about the 2 Tanoim. Okay? On we go, gentlemen. 1 minute more, and let's just make a start. Mitzvah. Let's start with leaving with a question. Not sure we'll get the answer today. We haven't got time. Says the Gemara, Shisha Osa B'Nissen is Rosh Hashanah La'omer, and Shisha B'Sivan is Rosh Hashanah L'Shtei Lechem. What does that mean? We're now going to end up with a couple more dates. Don't forget, Rava is of the opinion that we are looking at either Rav Meir or Rabbi Yehuda and saying there are only 4. There are two other items we find as a Rosh Hashanah. They are the beginning of the year to allow you something. Let's have a look what these two are. And they're mentioned in a brisa. We'll have to understand why they're not actually mentioned in our Mishnah, but they're in a brisa. The 16th of Nisan is Shisha also B'Nisan is Rosh Hashanah La'omer. And the 6th of Sivan is the Rosh Hashanah L'Shtalech. When we say the Shisha B'Sivan, we mean Shavuos. And when we say 16th of Nisan, we mean actually the day after the first day of Pesach. Let's have a look at Rashi. Rashi says Rosh Hashanah La'omer, Lechol min hachodosh. You can eat from the new crops. Now, we do need to spend time on this. And then there's another one coming up, L'Shtalech. And let's just focus today on the principle of Rosh Hashanah La'omer. What does it mean, Rosh Hashanah La'omer? Now, people may be familiar with the psukim in Emor, which tell us that after you have the first day of Pesach, at least let's just have a look at this ruling, that after the first day of Pesach, there's another korban which is going to be brought on the 16th of Nisan. The 15th was Pesach, you brought the korban Pesach on Erev Pesach, you've been eating the korban Pesach, you've been enjoying Seder night. The 16th actually has another korban. What is that? So it says, Kisovoyu, when you come, cut the crops, and you bring an omer, and it's an omer of barley, and that's brought, that's the omer, it comes with a korban, and that's brought on the 16th. And there's a very interesting halacha. And the halacha says, lechem v'koli v'caramel. Bread, parched corn, or big, large kernels are not allowed to be eaten that year ad etzem hayom hazeh, until that day. Ad taviachem es korban elokechem, until you bring this offering, the korban ha'omer, chukas olam l'doroseichem, b'chol moshvoseichem, wherever you live. So what's this halacha? This halacha tells us that it's the omer which permits, in other words, let's say you're going from the 16th of Nisan to the 16th of Nisan. So imagine you're planting wheat, barley, oats in the summer or maybe the autumn time. Anything that grows from that grain is called chodosh. It's new. It is not, you are not permitted to eat. Now this is very interesting, because it means any bread that comes from that produce, which is that year's crop, is forbidden to be eaten and is called chodosh. Once you've passed the 16th of Nisan, you bring the korban, and then that year's crop is now permitted. So it means if you're eating bread before the 16th of Nisan, it's got to come from wheat, barley, whatever you like, that comes from the previous year and not planted after the 16th of Nisan. You with me? Once you've got the 16th of Nisan, you're into a new year until you get to the 16th of Nisan. Yeah? You have to hold back from the new crop until you bring the korban, and after that korban, then you can enjoy the new year's crop. So what we're asking here, just on this point, we'll stop in a moment, is we're saying there's something else which is a new year. There's, according to, you remember, Rava said that according to Rab Meir or Rabbi Shimon, there are only 4 Rosh Hashanah dates. There's another date. What date is that? The 16th of Nisan. And that view is going to apply to Rabbi Shimon too. I've got another view. Now, it's very good according to, what are you going to do about Ruyat? We'll talk about Ruyat and Ossi next time. But what we're focusing on here at the moment, and I say we'll come back to this hopefully next week, is we found another date in the calendar, which is the 16th of Nisan, and that is the Rosh Hashanah, after which you're allowed to eat chodosh. You're allowed to eat from the crop that grew that year. Now, this may be, as a surprise, this halach of chodosh to people. In fact, it was chodosh, it was a chiddush. I think we've spoken about this principle before. Does it apply today? Does it or does it not apply today? It's a very good question. Do you understand the point? I know we haven't got the omer, but it says, until that day has passed, it would be forbidden to eat from crops of that year. Wheat, barley, you'd have to ensure it came from the previous year. Are you with me? It says, I'm going to just finish with this. It's fascinating halacha. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Osa lechol chodesh, I think we mentioned this, af bizman hazeh. Wow. This is even in Chutz La'aretz. Hold on, don't get too worried. Whether it's bread, koli, carmel, until you get to the next day, actually it's Feika Diyom, so you have to wait till the 18th of Nisan, or Eretz Yisrael, it will be the 17th of Nisan, after the day that you bring the Korban Omer. You with me? Says the Mishnah Berurah, this is fascinating, historical actually. He says, it says, B'chol Moshe Seichem, wherever you're living. And it doesn't limit it just to the time of the Beis HaMikdash. It's always applicable. You with me? So if, for example, you are in March or February, let's say March, and you have already the wheat, which has grown this year, that cannot be used for bread or cakes or anything. So he says, it seems even Chutz La'aretz everywhere. Says the Mishnah Berurah, and this is most interesting, Rov ha'olam ein nizhorim klal b'isur chodosh. The majority of the world does not concern itself with this mitzvah of chodosh. Why not? They rely, he says, because it's extremely difficult to ensure you've got last year's crop. Very difficult indeed. Certainly we're talking in the time of the Mishnah Berurah. He's dover kosher to be careful about this. And you may not be able to get this. So you're going to be months that you won't have any bread, any cakes. And therefore, there are some views that hold it's not applicable today. It's only midrabanan. And therefore, people will say mishas hadchak, that it's only midivrei sofrim. And there are some views like this. And therefore, it's malamid chus. And as it's so difficult, the Chachamim have said, we will not worry about the Isur Chodosh in Chutz La'aretz, even today. Right? Now, very interesting.
How could you do the mitzvah that you can't bring the Korban Omer? So how would you be able to do it?
Very good. That's why the Pasuk says, I see some new faces here as I look round. Waving to some people there. Nice to see you. Plus Joe's here as well. I can see, I can hear. Yeah, Mervyn, you're good point. That's why the Pasuk says, Be'etzem hayom hazeh, on that day. If there's a korban, very interesting actually, if there is a korban being brought, it will be brought on the 16th. Once it's brought, all corn is mutter from that point. If, however, it's not brought, you have to wait till the next day to eat the korban, to eat from the produce. In other words, it's not dependent just on the korban. That's why there's extra words there. But you don't need the word be'etzem hayom hazeh. Just tell me you can eat it from once you brought the. So be'etzem hayom hazeh tells me you can eat it, and it's applicable even today. So very interesting Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah is saying that the Isur Chodosh, most people did not concern themselves, particularly in Chutz La'aretz, about Isur Chodosh. Why it is so difficult, and therefore malamid chus, that they're relying, it's only midrabanan, and the Rabbanon didn't say it's applicable today. Now, this is very interesting. Old man that I am, when I was a young chap, we never heard of Isur Chodosh. It was absolutely unheard of. So, you got whatever bread you got, whatever Grudzinski's was selling, you'd have the bread and finished. Grudzinski themselves weren't concerned about it, even with their hechsher, and whether it was, under Kadassia or anything, there wasn't such a thing. Nobody was concerned themselves with Chodosh in Chutz La'aretz. In Eretz Yisrael, maybe yes, but not in Chutz La'aretz. Until Dain Berkowitz, Zichrono Livracha, found out, everyone's looking for, no, not looking for chumras, because let me point out first of all what the Mishnah Berurah said. The Mishnah Berurah says that if you can keep to Chodosh, try to. And he mentions here in this Bia Halacha in Simon Tov Pei Test 489, right after all the halachas of Pesach, you've got this little halacha at the end telling me about Chodosh, where the Shulchan Aruch says it does apply. Says the Bir Halacha, but Royu v'nochen lahachmir. Those people that can really should. Why? Because he mentions here a whole string of Rishonim, the early medieval commentaries, that hold it's as it is min haTorah today, even in Chutz La'aretz. And he mentions, I won't hold you back, it goes, the Rif, the Rosh, the Rambam, Sefer Mitzvahs Godel, the Itter, the Mordechai, the Rav Yor, Hagos Maimoni, the Ritva, the Ozer Ruah, and it keeps going. They all hold its min haTorah. Now I know, says the Mishnah Berurah, that the world could have difficulty with this one. And there are some views that hold this midrabanon, and the world has taken on to rely on those views. It's only midrabanon, and the rabbanon would relax it because it's shas hatchap. What are people going to do? Very hard to get hold of bread. Says the Mishnah Berurah, if you can manage, please try to. I'm not saying you have to. Royu v'nochen lahachmi if you can, because there are so many views that hold this min haTorah today. The Shulchan Aruch himself, he says you've got to do it. Now, as I say, I don't know how many years ago, quite a few, say Beryl Berkowitz, Zichrono Livracha, found out it's very simple. I think it was the start. Perhaps prior to that, you never saw dates on food. When production, you wouldn't know. But nowadays, it's called Marion grain and all these different grains that you buy in shop. You know exactly when the grain came out. You know exactly when it was produced. You know when it was cut. And it turned out that there were very many places that you could get hold of grain from last year. It's not like they finished last year's crop and don't sell it anymore. What are they going to do with that crop? They were selling everybody, all the shops everywhere. It turned out that without even knowing, the majority of the corn, the majority of the wheat or the grain that was being sold actually was old. In which case, what I mean by old, it comes from the previous year. They're not going to throw it away. It was in the market. It wasn't that difficult to find out where you can get hold of this grain. And therefore, slowly, people started, and now you'll find, I remember at the time it was a new thing, Chodosh, we know where it's coming from, maybe we should start using this. And I think you'll find now that all the shops, whether you're talking about Kadassia or the Bezdin, it's very easy to pick up grain from last year. And therefore you'll always find that the grain from last year will be used, and that will be the hechsher. I remember how it went. It started off, there were a couple of shops selling what they call yoshon. Those people who wanted to be particular, they started using those shops. The vast majority of the shops, I'm talking about the kosher shops, were not selling, they weren't particular. And slowly it moved on. It's not that difficult to get old crop. I mean, you can get hold of it in the shops as much as you can, the new crop. And it's not as if it's, not as tasty. So therefore, slowly this halacha came back. So that's to say an interesting halacha of things that have changed through time. So back to our Gemara, we will stop here. But what we're saying in our Gemara is we thought there were just 4 Rosh Hashanahs. It turns out we've got one more. In fact, we've got 2 more here. The one we're talking about is the 16th of Nisan. So therefore, let's say according to Rabbah, remember Rabbah said there are 4, according to Rav Meir or Rav Shimon. In fact, there are more than 4, because we also have the 16th of Nisan, which is also a Rosh Hashanah. It enables people from that day on to start eating the new crop, because you've already passed. Yeah, anything which has grown prior to that 16th of Nisan can now be used in bread and in cakes. So we need to understand, why is that not mentioned and not included in our listing of the 4 Rosh Hashanahs? And with that, gentlemen, we will close for today. Good to see various people. Good to see some faces back on. Yeah, good to see you there.
No.
Are you keeping well?
Very well, thank God. And you?
Good, good. Yeah, nice to see you. Yeah, Baruch Hashem. And who else we got here? We've got Sam with us as well. Some very good. And Joe, I think, has left us already, has he? Not sure. But Joe was with us. And there was somebody else with Simon, keeping well there? Simon Adler? Good to see you. Okay, I think everybody else we've said hello to. Charles, of course. How can we forget Charles? Charles, good to Charles, we can see your hand, your arm. There, the arm again. Yeah, very good in there. Very good indeed. Good to see your arm. And say good to see everybody else.
Charles,
yeah?
Norman, I just wanted to say that the cakes since Pesach,
yes,
ways, and biscuits are all marked new flour.
So what do you say? Where?
They probably want you to know, but they're marked new flour. They say on them, they put a sticker on them saying new flour.
You see, the problem with old flour is very good until you get to about, once you can start having new flour, there's nothing wrong with having new flour now. Yeah? When it said new flour, nothing grows. I mean, anything that would have been cut in December, January, February time. Yeah? So new means it's not going back 2 years, because that would have been a bit too old. And there may be some people who are a bit particular about that. That's why I think it says chodosh. It's new. It's not be. I think there's another point. Another point they're mentioning there when they say chodosh. There are some people who are particular about having any bread that was actually baked prior to Pesach and sold. That's what I think they're getting up there. They're not getting at the chodosh yosher that we're talking about. They're saying chodosh, it's been baked fresh since Pesach. That's what they mean. Yeah, I know there's nothing wrong. Of course, everybody sells their chometz. There are some people who, and we've been through this before when we were learning Pesachim, there are some people who prefer not to use bread that was actually baked, even though it was sold, and it's perfectly in order to be sold. They prefer to use bread which is baked fresh, not because of the freshness of it, because they don't want it to have been chometz over Pesach. It's perfectly mutter. And you say the selling, because everybody's selling their chometz, perfectly in order. There are some people.
Simon,
there are
is
some.
Kemach chadash, is it kemach?
I don't. New flour. It says new flour.
They'd be interested. You want to? Maybe you should ask them that question. They're trying to tell you that it's new flour, or they're trying to tell you it's chodosh. It's been baked fresh.
I'll ask them.
Fresh meaning there's no question about it being chometz over Pesach because it's been baked fresh. A good point, Sam. Whether they mean that the actual flour itself is chodosh, they're trying to get, but there's no Indian of chodosh right now. I mean, it's strange to say that, other than you may have thought that until now they've been using the old flour, and by now already it's 2 years old. They're trying to tell you no, it is fresh flour, or they're trying to tell you the other point that it is freshly baked, and therefore was not chometz over Yom Tov.
I'll ask them. I'll give them a ring.
Oh yeah, it'd be interesting if they know. No, somebody will know. Yes, there's somebody. Where are you talking about? In the shops? Yes. Yeah. Okay, very good. Maybe we should have a tasting session here where we'll have the new and old and see if we can tell the difference. But other than that, I wish everybody well. And hopefully next week back on.